Yep.
Uh,
Thanks, guys.
Great. Yeah, PM whenever you're ready.
Okay, am I audible?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. My name is Nari. My gender pronoun is he, him. If you have any boys, please write on chat that you have boy so that I can notice. And I will take around 5 or 6 minutes. Speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Before moving on to my substantives, I would like to set up today's debate. First of all, how does this removing the discretion actually looks like? And secondly, talking about why discretion is relatively likely to be abused, which also means that there will be a significant changes from the ordinary scale or the rules that is likely to be general. First of all, about setup, how does the removing the discretion look like? We think the current situation is where each host countries are granted with the right to arbitrarily change the rules or changing the number of medal or seats to each players. And also, it also means that there will be a significant changes in each for consecutive years. We think it also affects not only the tournament itself, but also the players are likely to be swayed by each minor changes. But also, what this remove looks like is that there will be no actual right for each host country to actively change the rules, except for offering a formal sort of changes for the general rules and stuff like that. So secondly, moving on to why discretion is likely to be abused, I would like to give a structural reason for this. First of all, it's in terms of political power. We think these events on these games are basically made by, for example, like domestic authority of each host countries or people who are relatively associated with political institutions in order to promote, for example, promote the prevalence of minor sports or having more in order to promote more individuals to opt into this event in a domestic level. We think it highly hinders other opinions to deter actively making these minor sports to become something as one of our sports in this event, but also in order to minimize the chances for other countries to get medals, they are likely to eliminate major sports, which is likely to be advantageous for other countries as well. We think that sort of echo chamber is likely to happen so that these countries are likely to overestimate how popular that minor sports are, or they do not necessarily find out the unfairness or these rules being disadvantageous for some specific individuals. But secondly is that the fact that chance of hosting the game is quite limited for each host countries. So in order to maximize this chance and opportunity to be beneficial for their own host countries, they try to maximize the uniqueness of their own countries, which also proves that it's unlikely for them to make this discretion in a minimum or in a trivial scale. But second of all, talking about why this is consequentially bad in two scales. First is in micro scale, and second is in terms of macro scale. First, about the micro impact is first of all, in terms of minor countries which are not able to host the sporting event in the very first place. We think countries coming from minor countries, for example, like Laos, which does not necessarily have economic power to host the game in the very first place. We think in that regard, minor countries are significantly disadvantaged in terms of deciding what kind of sport will be advantageous for the domestic player in the very first place. But second, but B is the player themselves are likely to suffer. I.e., it looks like how there'll be a significant less seats for the getting the medal or sport itself being removed from the sporting campaign. We think it denies all the endeavor and the dedication that they spent in order to win the medal. And note that this game is profound in Southeast East Asia, which is only held once in a 4 years. We think it is very significant for these athletes to decide what kind of player what kind of sports that they engage in, or they are totally denied with all this for or entire life endeavor in the very first place. We think that volatile situation is quite detrimental for the players, given the fact that these sports players are unlikely to have a balanced life with, for example, like working and stuff like that. They are purely engaged in that sport, and eliminating that sport in itself massively damages these players not only in athletic level but also in economic level, that they are likely to be deprived all the chances in order to actualize themselves, and also in order to self-express themselves, how hard that they have overcame several difficulties. But second is in terms of macro scale level. One, we would like to say that the sustainability of the tournament will significantly decrease, and given this discretion is quite arbitrary for each host country, it looks like how minor local sports cannot get enough attention or media coverage, even if that was arbitrarily included in that sporting event. Given the fact that audience of other country does not know, for example, like the rules of these minor sports, or the population of that sport in itself is quite minimum, so that they are unlikely to get enough attention by the media coverages, which also affect the profitability of that tournament in itself. But B is in terms of participants. They are likely, if there are significant changes in the number of medals that they can get, or these major sports getting eliminated in the very first instance, they are likely to, for example, run in extreme cases. For example, some players might boycott in the next tournament in order to show their fierceness towards these sports that they have literally engaged in for their entire life. We think this case is quite likely, given the fact that even in the past, there are some people, like for example, like Russian players or Palestine players who actually boycotted in order to show their fierceness towards the sports and stuff like that. We think in that political regard, we would like to say these players are likely to be exposed to a volatile situation, which also decreases the macro scale utility as well. Yes, I would like to take the point from CEO.
Yeah, surely there's still a peeling system at the status quo, means that there's likely to be a very representative community structure design to balance that kind of abuse problem.
First of all, we already characterized to you how exactly what kind of people are likely to make the decision in that domestic institution. They try to say there are other institutions, but given the fact that this one in a life opportunity will be given to this host country, there's not necessarily a political power for other institutions to actively fight against that power. But B is in terms of echo chamber. Even if these institutions try to fight against the prevalence of these minor sports, we would like to say not only these institutions themselves, but also the audiences or people in that domestic country is likely to oppose against the decision of other institutions who are actively want to prevent minor sports from being to be included in that sports. So I feel this will be a response to that case. But last of all, why our impact actually matters in this way. First of all, fairness in itself is a primary interest in this way. Note that sport should be separate from any political interest, given the fact that players are dedicating their whole entire life, and we win this debate.
Perfect. Calling upon thanking the Prime Minister for that fine speech. Calling upon the Leader of Opposition. Just a small reminder, anything you say beyond 7:15 doesn't make it to our notes.
Okay, hi, am I audible?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay. Tano, two rebuttals. Number one, there's actually no actual right for other countries to change the rules of the host country. Number two, the fact that hosting the games are hard already because there's a chance the country won't get chosen because of minor countries are at a disadvantage. And also two arguments. Number one being there's a reason that these countries don't want to host these kind of games. And number two, why the discretion is necessary for them to overcome this barrier. First, I'd like to start my rebuttals. Number one, that there's no what the Prime Minister said earlier, there's no actual right for other countries to change the rules of the host country. First, I have to say how and why, because you did not explain that. I also like to point out that people don't solo decide these games. The info slide already says that these countries prepare a list of games that the SEAGF Council will approve it, and you can appeal it also. It's not like they solo create a messed up list that they themselves will win the event. You have to remember that side government. And number two, what Prime Minister said, the fact that hosting the games are hard already because there's a chance the country won't get chosen because minor countries are disadvantaged. I also like to say how and why, because you did not explain any bit of that argument. You only said that these minor countries are at a disadvantage. But like I said earlier, the SEAGF Council has to approve it, has to approve the list of games from these countries. Now, I'll be moving on to my argument. Number one, there's a reason that countries don't want to host these kind of games. Let me give an example, like the Olympic Games. Paris and LA are the only countries that bidded to host the 24 Olympics, compared to 2016 or 2010 that had tens to maybe even 50 countries trying to bid for it. Why is that? It's because it's expensive. I also say another thing. LA was chosen to be the host for the 28 Olympics because Olympics were afraid no one would bid for the 2028 Olympics. So to avoid that, they had to let LA host it to avoid their embarrassment. Or another. So let's not talk about Olympic Games. Let's talk about the Commonwealth Games then, like Malaysia or Singapore, like Malaysia and Singapore. And why do they not want to host it? Let's say Let's say Cambodia, for example, that hosted the 2023. Let's just say they hosted the 2023 Commonwealth Games. They won't want to host the 2025 after that because why? A, it's expensive. There's no reason. It's gonna be hard for them to get any profit back. And media coverage, like what opposition said, maybe media coverage, they won't get paid for media coverage. It'll just be expensive. It'll just be a waste of development and a waste of money. Or maybe let's flip the profit incentive in status quo. Maybe government will say there will be more job opportunities, or maybe we can develop the whole country, for example, like stadiums. But like during the Brazil World Cup, there's a stadium that was deep inside the Amazon rainforest that only hosted the semifinal. It isn't a sustainable source of revenue. You won't gain any profit right after that. Yes, it might be a good stadium, but the problem is you won't get any money from it right after like I said, the Brazil World Cup stadium. Or maybe following the motion about the SEA Games, you will not get any profit if you make bigger stadiums, if you make bigger developments at faraway places like what Brazil did, because you will not get any revenue from it. And how about like what Gav will say about like maybe more job opportunities? Well, it's also a waste of money, and it could also lead to another situation like the Qatar World Cup scandal that happened when Qatar took refugees from India, took refugees from Lebanon, took refugees from Bangladesh. They took it, let them live in places that looks like prisons to build on stadiums. And did they get profit? Yeah, okay, sure, they did get profit, but not it made the name of their country ruined because of that. Let's look at the comparative here. The comparative here is that we spend money to develop the country because our first priority is to the citizens of your own country. Sorry. The first priority here is to the citizens of your own country. Yeah, yes, you want your tourist countries. You want other tourists to think, wow, this country is nice. But why would they think it's nice if they see that the citizens of their country are suffering, living in villages, living in small deserted villages? That's what the bottom line of this argument is, that these countries do not want to host the SEA Games because, like I said earlier, it will be expensive. The chances of them getting their profit back is almost zero. And yes, okay, like I said earlier, Gulf will say there will be more job opportunities or stadiums. But like I said earlier, it's because of like I said earlier that I gave reasons why it actually wouldn't. The opposition's government's case has already failed. Now on my second argument on why the discussion is actually necessary for them to overcome this barrier. This is to maximize the number of medals. Help us win at least one sport. Then how about just no SEA Games at all? Let's say Pandalela Renong is from Malaysia. If you put her into the SEA Games water swimming or diving competition, wouldn't she win all the games? Let's put the comparative here then. Let's cap the numbers of medals you can win. Like you can't just put 100 medals in squash and let's say Malaysia wins it all. Maybe like 5 medals and like max a country can win, or maybe like 2 medals max a country can win, because government will choose the sports they are confident they will win in. Sorry. What's the bottom line of this argument? The bottom line here is that this discussion is actually necessary for them to overcome this barrier, because if we can maximize the number of medals, if we can have us win at least one sport and no SEA Games at all, the people will actually be happy. They'll actually be proud of their country instead of thinking it will be a waste of money, thinking it will be a waste of development. Okay, let me talk more about how prioritizing the citizens of our country is actually way better than prioritizing these SEA Games, because as you can see, panel, citizens here are very important, a very important aspect in this debate. Because one, let's take example the football games that are happening in Malaysia right now. They're getting boycotted because the FAM are not responding to whatever what the country's citizens want. This is why panel, people don't understand. This is why, panel, the government needs to understand that the citizens of our own country is also important. It's actually the first priority instead of the other things. And with that, I'd like to end my speech. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanking Elo for the fine speech. DPM whenever you're ready.
Like this argument or
yeah,
the idea
go
behind.
ahead.
Okay, thank you. For POI, I prefer closing chat. I'll take one if there is from closing, if not from opening, around 5. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The Olympics 2024 in France was severely criticized for their unconscious bias, or could be unconscious bias, toward their own country or their own host country, granting the large number of the medals to their own domestic participants. This circumstances, we believe that it's likely to occur in opposition world as all actually characterized in that such way, resulting in no people from the outsiders coming in, or no people from the outsiders incentivized to watch those watch those sport events in the first place, resulting in more financial difficulty and economical burden of those host countries, or even not being able to host those countries in the first place because it's only their own country's participants that would join because they're advantaged, and the foreign countries' participants with disadvantages will never join. Those are the circumstances we see in the counterfactual, and we're happy to propose this motion. First of all, in my speech, I'd like to clarify what does it mean by this motion by removing the discretion, including what it means to appeal and approval or whatsoever in the first place. Second of all, I'd like to talk about the other scenario of abuse and explain why it's likely to be harmful against the countries against the other countries as well, including the major ones. And third of all, I'd like to talk about the counterfactual and the benefits, including the impact of our cases. First of all, the clarification. First of all, about the definition of discretion and appeal or whatsoever, we believe that according to its info slide, although there are circumstances of approval or appeal or whatsoever, those opportunities exist, at the end, there exists certain amount of the power against the host for the host countries to decide what kind of sports or whatsoever will be held in those places. Because if not, this debate will be the debate with really no differences within the paradigm, and there is no need to debate upon this. Although there are certain amount of appeals or discretions or whatsoever, as the term discretion shows, the host country has the certain power and has the certain authority over those circumstances, and meaning that although the appeal were to be made, it's likely that those countries the way that the host country wants will be reflected to a certain degree for the sake of this debate. That being said, second of all, what is the scenario of the abuse that we see? My partner told you about those minor sports being the only or the main factor of those sports, but we believe that the flip side is likely to be achievable as well. If Malaysia were to be the host country, given this appeal on this tournament, we believe that it's likely that those major sports, including the karate or whatsoever, will not be supported. Rather, the minor sports, the local sport or whatsoever, is likely to gain support as well. The flip side is likely to occur as well, because considering what Thailand did, I'm not sure about the other sports, exactly what the other sports were, but given that those karates or whatsoever were included, it's likely that, and also the Malaysia made the appeal to it, it's likely that Thailand having preferences toward the major sports, not likely to against catering to the minor sports or the participants or whatsoever. Either side, we believe that it's likely to be helpful on the point that those things are not decided in the first place. The participants are not sure about whether they are eligible to join those tournaments for the sports or not, or whatsoever. We believe that either scenario could happen, and either scenario is harmful for the sake of the popularity of the sports, of the sacredness, and also for the terms of participants achieving the opportunity to make the dream come true or to make the self-actualization for their dreams. Second of all, moving on to third of all, I'd like to move on to talk about the economical benefit and flip the opposition cases, saying that it's likely to be the economical burden, and explain why in our world it's more likely to be the economical body at the end of the day. We believe that the counterfactual, or the world without government, the world that we support, is likely to be the games, for example, the games or the sports or something like that will be determined by IOC in terms of Olympics. For this circumstances, likely to be decided by SEAGF or whatsoever. In such circumstances, one, we believe that there are to be a certain amount of sports that are set, not likely to be disappearing or appearing randomly or whatsoever. And second of all, likely to be if there were to be certain appeals in those council, likely to be might be accepted in either world, like it is done in the status quo in the Olympics or other sport event or whatsoever, if it were to be seen as a fair and important and beneficial. In the status quo, the biggest reason why those sporting event is likely to be the financial burden is not necessarily because of its structure itself, given that Olympics not only gives the economic
DPM, we are not audible anymore.
Sorry, am I audible now?
Yep, you're audible. I've stopped you at 4 minutes and 50 seconds. You were talking about...
Okay, thank you. Sorry for inconvenience.
Yeah, you were talking about what the counterfactual looks like in terms of what the games are when there are appeals on your side.
Okay, thank you. Right, restarting in 3, 2, 1. The reason why in the status quo it's going to be red, or that the economical burden is huge enough, it's not necessarily because it's the Olympic is so or whatsoever. Rather, because of the fact that those countries or a big sports event itself is likely to be the minor thing, or not to be seen a large number of people, that to make increasing the acknowledgement of those countries itself, or giving the opportunity to advertise what the country looks like, where they have for tourism or whatsoever. We believe that it's likely to be achievable in our world, given that there are certain benefits in terms of fairness, in terms of sportsmanship, and also the reputation that they can gain by participating in this Olympics, and also the fame that they can gain, and increasing the competitiveness among the tournament itself, resulting in higher expectations from the viewers, fans, and more people opting in as a form of players and also for viewers. We believe that huge economical benefits are likely to be gained compared with the status quo or compared with the opposition world, where their own country hosts only for their own countries and own country players. Rather, we believe that it's likely to be only for the domestic ones not being able to host in the first place. So these are the benefits that we see, and the reason why economical benefits are rather better in our world. Finally, the comparison between the status quo. We believe that there are certain impacts, which is about one about the value of those tournaments itself. We believe that if it were to be imagine that the easiness to break in rules of 2016 was more difficult than that of 2017, and it's really easy to break in Worlds 2020 whatsoever. Who cares about such tournaments? No one. And we believe that it's because those tournaments have a certain value in the price itself, and also for the factors that those CDs make sense in and of itself. We believe that people are incentivized to opt into those places, and moreover, given on the point of those fairness, we believe that depriving the opportunity for players to self-actualize gives the harms against the players as well, and also in terms of economical benefits about the host. The opposition side are trying to make the situation worse rather than a status quo. I mean, in a world without those descriptions existing, and for these certain reasons of one, about the economical benefit of host, two, for the players, three, for the fans and enjoyment, we believe that we won this debate. Thank you.
better than
Yep.
Z. You might
Thanks,
be true,
DPM.
but that's not what they're asking of you.
Hello,
and
whenever
that will
you're
not
ready.
be something
So
you should
hello, whenever you're
verify
ready.
easily.
Am I audible?
Yep, audible and visible.
Okay, great. The first thing I want to debunk from opening government is this idea that there is no check and balance and countries get to decide whatever the heck they want to put the sport in and therefore dominate the sport. CO points this out in a POI. I just want to expound on this, so don't let OG run away with this case. The SEAGF Council, if you read the info slide, has an appeal process that's given. I'm going to add to this. It's also supervised by the International Olympic Committee, which has its headquarters in Switzerland. It's also supervised by the Olympic Council of Asia, which has its headquarters in Kuwait. So there's some level of regulation and there's some level of standardization across the games. If you look at the SEA, like the council charter and rules, a host nation must stage like a minimum of 22 sports. 2 sports from athletics and aquatics, 14 sports from Olympics and Asian Games, a maximum of 8 sports from Cat 3. Each sport does not offer more than 5% of the total medal tally. So you can't just have one sport and then allocate like 100 medals to it and then like declare yourself the winners of the Olympics, right? Each category that you want to introduce must have at least 4 countries in it. And no, this is mitigation because it protects against opening government's harms of, countries just deciding whatever the heck the sport they want to put in. Sports competed in the Olympic Games and the Asian Games are given priority. They just say the host country, while they have the discretion to do so, there are still a certain set of rules by which they must follow by. There's a maximum of 4 sports for regional and traditional sports, right? There's a cap on the number of medals you can win in the sport. It's very unlikely that even if they have the discretion, they will like just decide their own list and win their own Olympics, their own SEA Games according to opening gov. The second thing I want to say in mitigation is just that we can minimize the number of medals given the new sport, right? Like if you look at Indonesia introducing roller skating and winning all 12 gold medals, there are proposals for 2026 SEA Games Cambodia that a country can only win maximum 2 medals in one sport. This is to make it more competitive. I know that is mitigation, but it goes to show this. The argument isn't to remove the discretion entirely, but rather to regulate what actually goes on into the games. The last piece of mitigation I want to give you is that people know about the sports in advance. It's not like they show up on a day and like, hey guys, surprise, we're introducing XYZ sport. Guys, you know about the sport like a long time before that. There are 1 or 2 years when the countries host, when they bid to host the games, they have like a list of games that submit for proposal. All of this is like transparent. It's not like you go and then like get pops on you. All of this shows there is a check and balance against countries deciding what kind of sports they want to put in and not just favoring themselves. But secondly, let's talk about the comparative, which is what LO tells you, which goes probably not responded to with enough respect. We said that hosting the games is expensive. And this is a signaling effect, right? Like the example we gave of Singapore not being willing to host Commonwealth Games is simply recognizing that we are moving away from sports. In a time with tight economies, countries are likely to prioritize their own people, welfare policies, economic development, and it's a signaling policy. If Singapore, one of the top 5 richest countries in the world, and probably the richest country in Southeast Asia, does not want to host the games because it's not profitable, we told you the comparative is that there will be no games at all. So yes, might the quality of different worlds be different? Yeah, but the comparative you need to deal with is no SEA Games at all and no country being willing to host it. The importance of national values and representation, we said, is that these sports are traditionally not represented. If you look at games, things like Olympics, right, you will not see the same games as what we host in the SEA Games. Games like Muay Thai for Thailand, things like sepak takraw or chess, xiangqi, shuttlecock, which is kind of funny games from Malaysia, wushu, or even like they introduced Valorant recently. These are games which aren't really like competed at other games, and we think it's important for traditional representation. Why is this important? At the point in which people get to see their national identity, i.e. Thai people can see people practicing Muay Thai on the big screen. Malaysian people and Indonesian people can see people playing sepak takraw. It's important for them and they are more likely to be okay with their government's hosting. They are more likely to encourage their governments to host it because these people love their culture and want to see it portrayed on the big screen. So it's important, right? They derive value from it and they're happy. Again, this is tied back to countries wanting to tie the games, which, is contingent, which OG's case is contingent on. They need to access all the benefits of people hosting the games. The third thing I want to talk about is why the SEA Games is so important. Why having no SEA Games at all is really detrimental. The first thing we would say is that the SEA Games is often seeks to propagate Asian community values. Note, all of the countries in the SEA Games are countries from Southeast Asia. They are mostly members of ASEAN, and then there is a mentality that we as ASEAN people can put aside our differences and politics and get together and play sports. Sports is important because it unites people across different races, genders, and belief values, right? When they go to the stadium and sit and watch football, or they cheer for the national athletes, they are no longer divided by other lines, but they cheer and they say, we are from X country and we want X country to do well. We think therefore sports is important for unity. It's important so politicians and countries get to put aside politics for once and get to come together and, you know, just foster general goodwill and community values in ASEAN. Therefore, we think SEA Games probably very important. You have less of it on your side because not only is it expensive, people don't feel represented under your side of the house. Note, the leaders of the medals in the SEA Games are largely only Thailand, Indonesia, and Malaysia. There is little to no incentive for countries like East Timor, Brunei, and Laos to want to host the games. If they don't make money and if they don't win, then they're not going to host the games, and that means no games for everyone. But like, just think about it, if you're East Timor and you only have had like 3 gold medals in like the history of the SEA Games, there is literally no incentive, right? Countries like Brunei have the money to host SEA Games, but they don't want to because and we think we can shift the calculus a little bit if they can put some national representation inside. But I'll take OG before that.
Even if you say that traditional representation of regional sports are important, don't you think that the government world is better because in opposition you can deprioritize them based on the thought of the host country?
Yeah, but like I said, there's like an appeal process for that, right? You put forward the list to the council. The council is not biased. The council has independent representation from everyone, input from the Olympic community, etc. So yeah, I don't know. It's not like one guy deciding everything. Like, don't let OG run with that. The last thing I want to talk about is why the SEA Games is an important platform for young budding athletes. Athletes get a chance and a platform to compete against heavyweights like Shanti Pereira, like Joseph Schooling. No, they probably can't beat them, but can get their name out there. Right, governments are more likely to sponsor and create infrastructure to help these young athletes. Right, Singapore sent like 400 or 500 athletes this year to the SEA Games. It allows a platform for young budding athletes who otherwise would not have had the opportunity to prove themselves on an international platform. Not everyone is Joseph Schooling and not everyone can make it to the Olympics immediately, but the SEA Games is often a stepping platform for these people to go up there. For reasons of national pride, for reasons of sports uniting people across skin color and politics, for opportunities for budding athletes, very proud to oppose.
Not
Perfect.
four
Thank
to
you, Leela,
eight,
for this
it's
fine
not
speech.
like
Calling
six,
upon member
one to
Gov whenever you're
10.
ready.
Give one if they
Gender pronoun she, her. Gonna take one POI coming from the opening half, from 5 to 6 minutes if I have the time. All right, POI vocally. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The biggest value coming from the opening opposition side, and they never actually mentioned about the intention coming from the government gonna using the money to the system. Other case they provided is about how this kind of social hierarchy cause of the issue of social structure is actually success in this country. Now I'm gonna bring up some of the cases about how the corruption is actually seriously going on in the southeastern country, and government cannot guarantee to use the same amount of money rather than being guaranteed in front of TV show and an entire sport union, rather than they're actually using the money transparently into the public. Just take a look at how like Thailand government is actually dominated by the military, how Myanmar government is dominated by the military, how other government is also have the rumors of politics. Do you actually think the government have the intention to use money to build about this kind of like small rooms in single like sport place rather than use the money in to support their people? Just take a look of the delta here. Building such room is actually doesn't cost that much. Why is likely to have a case? Like what we clearly see in the info slide, this kind of not popular sport in Thailand or like in other countries is actually the single combat room. What does it mean? It means people who combat together is actually require a single room which already have like which already have like established in such area, because there are also have traditional Thai combat room. Therefore, they also can use the same room nationally to be the same sport to use it, right? Therefore, I do not think there has actually a huge delta for them to build an actual room. They can arrange in an alternative way. They also can arrange room circling. After they finish the traditional sport room, they can use it, and they can use it for other not popular room. I do not think there have some actual credits on that kind of point to use actual resources to build it anyways if they're actually poor. Now let's take a look of how the opportunity can be decreased. Even though you're probably gonna argue that the elites population probably gonna use a chance to entitle themselves, but here the thing is, even though they're gonna use that to entitle themselves, it doesn't mean they didn't put ethic into that, right? We have to say that in such country which people is losing the motivation for them to develop themselves to pursue a better future due to the corrupt government and high social hierarchies, it is also fine for this like LA to be the role model for people coming from the bottom. At least they can know what is the perceiving of excellence. Hey, judge, now you and me is standing in the room is because we're like perceiving the excellence of debates. Even some of us is being to like private schools, they have like international background or something. It doesn't mean our passionate of perceiving the excellence is actually fake, right? They actually have the background of practice day by day. They actually go to practice and like show on a TV show. If they're actually not paying any effort, I think they're just makes themselves into a crime, into a joke. Therefore, I think even though the elites actually exist, they still can bring some impact to motivated population coming from the bottom. Now let's moving on to our argument. In our extension, we're gonna explain mainly about how the representative of minority actually exists, and this gonna actually impact in the cultural perspective and bring more job opportunity rather than only the labor opportunity coming from building the houses. Then we're gonna move to the chance for split player into international competition and how the sponsorship is actually gonna be caused into international relation. Let's take a look at the preparation of sport player. I think in a principal level, the OG doesn't mention about it enough, but they already have established competition and established program for years and years. It's 2024 now. If we just announce 1 year later, the sports that they already prepared for so long gonna actually be canceled, firstly, it's gonna be unfair for them. Then it actually gonna decrease the reputation of such competition for sport player from local perspective. It probably can also decreases the excellent sport player to join competition because they're gonna be feared. If what they're playing is like defined as unpopular, if in the future ours will become unpopular in such region, are we gonna get canceled or not? Therefore, they probably are not going to value such sports competition in Southeastern country anymore. And actually going to cause a backlash largely to such competitions' existence in the future. Now, moving on to how they are actually decreasing the perceiving of excellence and creating job opportunity for them. Because people coming from the bottom, they have the passionate of this kind of excellent things. Therefore, they can actually get into the culture and practice day by day. This kind of competition is actually can gain their attention and probably gonna get audience for them. They can actually going to teach children who have the interest in the future when they retire. Therefore, actually also getting such interest in the very first place. Then moving on to why it's cultural pluralism and like other perspective, like what we mentioned about like wushu or something is actually not popular in Southeastern country, but it doesn't mean they don't have the immigration who has a tradition in such area. 500 km compared to Chiang Mai, there's a located town who is training wushu all the time because they're earlier Chinese immigration. They also become the minority of the country. They also should be voiced out because there is also having a tradition in their area by that as well. That actually means Southeastern country is actually diverse. They need to actually having such diverse culture to show up different things. Even the mainstream value is not value minority people's voice, but it doesn't mean we should cancel that. Firstly, it is there, right? Secondly, that is the diversity we're perceiving to make Southeast a better place. Now let's moving on to how they are actually having more chance to prepare for the international competitions. Sport player, even though it's not popular in such area, it doesn't mean they are not going to join the international competition. In advance, they're probably gonna be sponsored by other area. We know the southeastern country actually have a long-term relationship with Japan or China or other country. Therefore, they probably is get investigated by this kind of country. When they're actually building such competition, include a program which is content by other countries' traditions, like Japanese or Chinese something, they actually gonna get some sponsorship by this country as well. In a long-term developing country, I think they actually gonna get more benefit rather than losing the intention from a no intentional government to support their people. Therefore, for the bottom people, we're more than proud to propose anyways.
Thanking MG for that speech. Mo, whenever you're ready. Opening up, please remember to pause the recording.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay. PY in the chat. Maybe take one from OG.
Am I audible?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, so I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So first of all, my first speaker clearly explained that the characterization for the individual for the athletes, individual athletes. So in my speech I will focus on the benefit for the whole countries. So firstly, I will rebut what the closing opposition side said. They talked about long-term benefit by hosting the Southeast Asian Games, but I think that the argument supports in our side. The reason is that of course, the infrastructure, the tourism, and railway, bridge, road, all of them are very important, and these are very inevitable to send a good drive. So as you know, some Southeast Asian countries don't have such are not so rich, so they don't have good infrastructure, and they don't have so much attractions to go to be gone to the tourism. So it's inevitable. But so what I want to say is that to such dreams come true, hosting the Southeast Asian Games is the most effective way, I think, because as my first speaker explained that they can get by hosting the Southeast Asian Games, they can get a lot of sponsorships in the worldwide coming from the foreign countries, which is the developed countries, so they can get a lot of monies. And moreover, if once Southeast Asian countries host such games, they need to prepare a lot of things to become a lot of athletes, to become a lot of medias. So once Southeast Asian countries host such games, the railway, the infrastructures will develop, and and moreover, once such games will be held, the people will be attracted in that countries, so people will pay attention to that country. So they if it's not all people, but some people will be attracted, and so it will be connect to the effect for the tourism. So the argument is not so important. So next, move on to the engagement for each houses. Firstly, in terms of the opening governance, I said they talked about the economical benefit, and the example was Olympic. But in this motion, as the motion said, Southeast Asian Games. So I'll talk about the uniqueness for the Southeast Asian Games. As I mentioned before, some Southeast Asian countries are not so rich comparing to the some developed countries. So what I want to say is that by hosting Southeast Asian Games, they can get a lot of sponsorships coming from the other developed countries. And if once they get the sponsorship from the developed countries, their relations the good points by hosting the Southeast Asian Games. Their relationship will be eternal, and they can get a good relationship for the companies. So this is the uniqueness for the Southeast Asian Games. So there is a big difference between the Olympic and the Southeast Asian Games. And next, move on to the opening opposition side. They told that hosting games is very expensive. But as the first speaker and I explained before, we can pay off such burden by getting the sponsorships. And by hosting the such games, there will be a lot many athletes from other countries will come, and they can get a lot of sponsors, and they can get the sponsorship, so their burden will be paid off. And moreover, if they set the discretion in that games, there will be a few athletes to participate in that games. So what I want to say is that by setting the discretions, what I want to say is that by setting the discretion, they will lose the opportunity to get the sponsorships. So anyway, the number of the sports in the Asian Games and the number of athletes will directly connect to the number of the sponsorship, and the more sponsorship will cooperate, the more they get the economical benefits. So for these reasons, the closing government will win this debate. Thank you for listening.
Perfect. Thanking Kavya for that fine speech, calling upon Opweb to wrap up the debate.
Hi, POIs through chat. I'll try to take one from opening. Time starts in 3, 2, 1. I think it's reasonably to assume that if you're a country who has relatively less economic power and population, and you are trying to compete in a regional tournament like the one stated in the motion, it's likely that you're not going to have a large possibility to get a lot of medals, and thus when you're when the people from your country is watching it from live stream, they're not likely going to be motivated to watch that again because they realize that they're not that represented because they do not see their teams being able to become competitive and win championships. If that is the case, we recognize that in the status quo, when we're leaning onto opening governments or the government bench's case to look at canceling the discretion of individual nations when a standardized set of sports is set, we do realize a lot of these smaller countries who have relative less competing power loses their competitive advantage, and their citizens aren't as engaging into the sports as they are going to be on our side of the on our side of the comparative. This is really bad, and it's really bad for sports relationship in general and bad for the unification or the general political atmosphere of the ASEAN countries. Now let's quick dealing with closing government on moving on to opening government and onto the opening opposition comparison. Closing government talks about corruption, but I don't really understand why is that very exclusive in the case, because if you are still continuing the games and countries are still going to be corrupt, necessarily the harms are still going to exist on both sides of the houses. I don't understand why the impact is unique on opposition side of the case. Quickly moving on to opening government. Opening government tells that major push is that there will be a lot of abuse of power, which is severely already mitigated from opening opposition's rebuttals on how there are already levels of paneling to distinguish what kind of sports are going to be passed through. Second, they also talk about they focused on the impact of individual players not getting enough sports opportunities. I think this is comparatively worse. This is exaggerated by opening government house. They tell you that they're not going to have a career. I don't think this game stated by the motion is the only competition in their career that they're going to attend. There are still Olympics, there are still other kinds of regional tournaments and opportunities they're going to attend. Secondly, the sports likely going to be canceled or likely going to be omitted are not likely going to be the very popular kind of sports that are going to be played by every country, because host countries know that they're all going to bring a lot more attention, so they're not likely going to get rid of these sports because it harms their economic incentive. So which means that there are only a really few number of kind of sports that they're going to cancel, which also means the amount of players who do not get to play in this kind of competition are minimalized unto a degree. So we do think that the impact they're trying to pursue is severely mitigated to a point that literally do not have any impact. And they talk about economic benefits. They tell you, okay, if you're going to only have comparative advantage or only have advantage on your when you're hosting, they only have like niche sports, they're not going to have a lot of competitiveness. As again, there are already economic incentives for countries to have sports that is more comprehensive. So the popular sports will still be hosted. Secondly, we don't think that as a country, when you're constantly losing in the sport, your citizens still want to pay attention to it. So as in the long term, we don't think that economic benefits will last, as countries, one, are less incentivized to bid in the first place, and two, citizens of countries are less willing to watch these sports and in turn provide you that kind of economic benefits that you stated. I think opening oppositions also tries to push this claim slightly, so I don't want to spend a lot of time. What is the difference between opening? Before that, I'll take a POI from OG.
Thank you. We think that major sports, including karate, are cancelled in the status quo. But even if that wasn't the case, don't you think it will end up minimizing your impact of compensation and incentive to host and watch them in the first place?
No, I previously stated, like, when you have the incentive, like the reason my partner have stated also, like the reason for you to have an incentive to host is because you have political and economic incentive, because one, people in your country wants to watch it in the first place, and two, when they're feel represented in these kind of sports. When different smaller countries with less economic power who feel discriminated in larger tournaments do not have the incentive to host, you already lose a huge portion of economic activity and tourism. Two, you do not, when less people are hosting, means decreasing popularity of the sports in general, means that you're unlikely going to secure the kind of economic benefits you're trying to strive for. Let's look at the opening opposition, closing opposition exchange. Opening opposition tells you a few things. They tell you that they will have less incentive to bid. However, they don't really elaborate on that incentive, right? They don't really tell you why suddenly countries have more incentives when they have the hosting discretion. Closing opposition comes in and tells you, one, this kind of incentive goes in a few ways. My partner told you that there are far more political incentive when they have a justification for you to demonstrate your investment is not a waste, that in the long term it will also bring more economic benefits. It tells you that it's not only a national pride, but also an increasing exposure of your culture and co-opting nationalist sentiment. Secondly, my partner also told you there are various economic incentives. Opening opposition only recognizes that there's going to be huge spending on the short-term scale. However, without recognizing in the long term, there will possibly be a lot more economic returns after, during, and after tournaments are hosted, which meaning like a more economic flow when people are exchanging goods, more people are exchange of people when during tournaments, more likely to get domestic and international exposure, which means you're going to get far more sponsorship and more likely going to secure a more foreign direct investment into your country. When you have more exposure and international awareness, you're much more likely going to get more jobs and a larger taxation base when there's more economic flow, and so on and so forth. So in and all, when we also talk about when opening up, what this means is that when opening opposition tells you there's less capacity for countries to bid and they're less likely to bid, the argument is comparatively much more likelier under our closing opposition's extension, telling you the underlying incentives for countries to politicians to economically actually willing to do this and actually willing to compete for the bid to increase the awareness of their states, of their culture, and so on and so forth. Lastly, when opening opposition talks about the principle of fulfilling people, closing opposition better fulfills this principle when we tell you that the priority of the citizen of an individual country is principally legitimate. When we tell you that we prioritize the citizens, when we have allowed them to be represented through niche sports that only the citizens in this country are much more familiar in and much more likely going to win in. Therefore, we do not necessarily, this is a direct engagement into fulfilling the principle of for representing citizens and paying for, like, doing something for their tax money they're paying. Therefore, proud to oppose.
Perfect. Thanking CEO for this for the fine speech and everyone for a wonderful debate.